power, you just have a powerful tubes. That's the biggest thing.
Change the tube to match the voltage of the juice.
Yeah.
Well, that's really neat, man, because I heard those Loretta Lynn and Dolly's partner and that, and they all said their dads could hook up a car radio and make it play in the house somehow.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Yeah, you change the battery because most of them will be battery powered to a DC voltage.
On the radio.
Yeah. Tube radios, you got to be careful playing with the old tube radios because they're two wire, and if you're not hooking up like capacitors,
Yeah. And these are positive and ground. You have to really pay attention. They take the positive and hold it to the brain, and the negative goes into the distribution.
it's actually a better way overall because what it does is it runs it through the switch bit and it puts the switch on a different spot. Like we take a look at today's vehicles, most vehicles are negatively controlled or negatively switched circuits, which means it puts the switch after the load, which means the voltage and the current will drop because of the resistance of the component. So when they do the positive, it's easier to do it that way. It changes how the current flows, puts the switch on the negative side, what we would call the negative side of the circuit.
Right. That's the trouble. I always
This is at the Beller Automotive Museum in Romeoville, Illinois.
Chevrolet opening and close. So there's no voltage spike out of the box. Barely any. When you open and close that field wire and then brush it operating, then they got one brush ground. He's always going.
Anyone wants to read any of this, just pause and read. The rumble seats have a lot more room than you actually think. It actually has more than it looks like in here from the camera.
And what does that tube do when it jumps into the condenser? When the point's open and when the spark sparks out of the coil. There's that condenser.
So what a capacitor is a storage device. So what a capacitor is a storage device. So the easy way to think of it is that the positive side and the negative side of the capacitor, we'll just call it that for conversation's sake. One side and the other side, they're not all connected to each other at all.
In the condenser.
In the condenser. They're isolated from each other. Okay. So think of it this way, is that if I took a magnet and stuck it to that window, and you took a piece of metal to the other side, it would stick it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if I take the magnet away, the piece of metal falls off.
Okay.
So what you're looking at is, think of the capacitor is one side is the magnet and the other's not. So what I do is that the capacitor will pull in the electrons and store them. Billions of them, and billions and billions and billions and billions. And what happens is that when the points open and close, you break the circuit, and the purpose of the capacitor is to take the surge so it doesn't arc across the points and burn them up. That's why if your capacitor fails, it burns the point gap up. So it's a surge. Now, if you go up and touch it, one of the things I always told the students, and they always says, you got to be careful of these old guy mechanics is because they'll do something. And I showed them what a capacitor looks like. So if you see one of these little silver things with a wire hanging on it, sitting on your toolbox, do not grab that wire. You are going to get nailed because the capacitor will hold the charge 6 months.
Okay. It's interesting you flip the word condenser and capacitor.
Yeah, they're the same thing.
That's the same thing, a different name for
Yep,
it.
a rose by any other name is still a rose. It's just a capacitor condenser. It's a little newer term, but it is the same exact device.
Okay.
But anyways, what I told them is at that point. So if you see a capacitor sitting
Right.
on your toolbox.
I know.
You can count on it. If you went over to ignition system and charged that baby up, it says it may,
And what would you do to charge it if you had a car battery?
you could actually just go over and put it to the negative post in there, take a wire from there, and just touch the lead. It'll charge that fast,
Okay.
and it'll hold it. And
And
what
then,
happens?
so then you could discharge it by holding the case to the ground
and
and
then-
touching it to the head.
Yeah.
Would
So-
you see it?
Yeah.
Voltage
hear it.
spike or
Oh,
hear
you'd
it
hear it crack.
Yeah.
So if you take, for example, like a wash machine, a capacitor start motor, and it's not a very good capacitor, is that you want to ground that sucker out because it'll kill you. That discharge for it. Now, capacitors in automotive applications aren't that bad. But I always told the students is if you see one of them on the wires, this is what you do is you're going to be smarter than them.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, you know, Mr. Meaner told you how to do this. You pick it up by your case. And this is as soon as you do that, yell like you've been shocked. This is, but don't touch the wire. Just yell like you've been shocked. This is why. Because the person who said it there is going to be chuckling and laughing.
You can
And then
see.
what you do is you walk over to him and says, here.
Here, take this back, buddy.
And
That'd be great.
And you bury the wire in their hand. This is
Downers Grove Auto Parts used to leave them on the counter charged up for everybody to come in and fiddle around with everything,
Yep.
and somebody would get zapped.
Yep.
So I just never touched them. I didn't know how they charged it.
Yeah, it's just the difference. And think of it just as
I'm
a
up track.
magnet on the other side of that window. It's going to track the charge. But once you take the circuit out, all those electrons are trapped.
They're just sitting in there.
They're just sitting there waiting for a path. And if you're the path, it says,
And
okay.
so what happens when points open again and charge it again?
Well, what happens is it just absorbs it. So once the points are closed, it's connected to the
And it-
ground side of the circuit. It
It
discharges
can
itself.
discharge when the points close again.
Yeah,
This is what I believed.
yeah. And it just, all it is, it just prevents the arcing at the points contact. And it
Yeah,
just-
they're
it's
trying
sort
to
of-
get that electricity out of it.
It's the same thing that they use, for example, on radio circuits. They don't see it so much today because the electronic ignitions and stuff like that. You know, the old voltage regulators create a lot of electrical noise. So that's where you get that hum and that whine and that crack on your radios all the time. So what they do is they actually put capacitors. I'm sure you remember capacitors on the back of the alternator.
Mm-hmm.
It did the same thing. It just basically that arcing and stuff like that. It took it to the case. It just kept
Wow.
grounding it out.
Nice.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Capacitors. I tell people watch capacitors. Radios. That's why that radio that you showed back there. You don't play around on those radios. You ground everything out. You take they take a screwdriver or something like that, and you put a test light wire on it, and you put a pretty good sized resistor inside of it, and you clip it to ground, and you touch the capacitor, and the resistor slows down the discharge, so you don't burn up the wire or the screwdriver tip. But you definitely want to discharge capacitors. A radio capacitor or like an old color TV, a tube radio in there, you get connected to that one, and you're pushing up posies. You are dead. It'll fry you.
A lot of juice in there.
Yeah, you figure that they're rated by microfarads, and I forgot what a microfarad is, but it's equivalent that some of these capacitors can discharge like 75, 80 amps of current instantly. And amps are there. It takes 25 volts and half an amp to kill you. A battery in a car
Oh, plenty.
is enough to do it,
Oh, yeah.
except that God was very creative, and He made us with a lot of resistance. So we discharge it very slowly, because if we were a good conductor, we would never survive the time that we, were a little kid and drooled and stuck our fingers on the outlet.
Well, what's interesting is if you did touch a wrench from the positive to the negative of the lead acid battery, I mean, it'll weld itself like that. But I have touched both sides, and it didn't hurt.
That's because you have resistance.
I've seen people weld wrenches to like the radiator and the post, or taking off the starter and they didn't disconnect the battery. Dude welded the wrench to the frame from the starter post and he couldn't get it off.
Yeah, that's 400 cranking amps is normal starter use.
Mm-hmm.
The batteries today, a lot of them are 1,000 cranking amps available. Man, hey, you can weld with that for real.
Unintentionally.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a great driving four-door right here. Yep, 1930.
So these are current plates,
Yep.
so they can be.
Yeah, all these you can drive all these. Not all the ones in the back, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's
Yeah,
got
that
a
one's
bunch
kind of missing some pieces there.
Yeah, a few pieces before we could drive him again. You guys want to look at that woodwork on that mail truck? That thing's really neat. And I enjoy the irons that the doors slide on and the door irons on the rear. Those guys that just left were showing me pictures of a 35 Chevy panel truck with a lot of wood in it.
Hey, if it works, it works.
Yeah, I know, right? It's really.
Some of the old stuff worked really, really well.
Look at the window. It's sweet. Yep, she's locked. Got your window locked? Yep. Hey, put the irons like this, you know.
To stiffen it up. And
Yep. And look at them irons on the back doors, man. That's the kind of stuff I love. You can figure that out, you know what I mean? You can surely get your finger pinched too.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that great? I love how thick it is, you know.
yeah, they made it to stay.
About a quarter-inch thick, 1 inch, a lot bigger than an inch.
Yeah, if they made a modern equivalent of that, it'd last like 5 years and then be gone.
Yeah, then they got out of plastic.
Now, this one I like.
Yeah?
I like this guy.
Like this old guy, this was just donated to the museum by one of the oldest member in the one club. This guy came back from World War II and started a Mile Club. And he was here. He was, I forget what his birthday was, 94th or 5th, whatever it was, 93rd, I can't remember. He was just here a couple of weeks ago. And we had a wonderful meal with everybody. It was a blast. And he surprised everybody because he said he was donating his Mile he's had for so many millions of years here, man. And he just decided he didn't want it at home anymore. In case something happens to him, it'll be here.
There's liquid in the radiator still.
Yeah, he was 90-some years old. And he's had issues that what you're looking at here is he's got an automobile radiator in a truck grill. The grill's on the, like that orange truck, the double A's, it's a wider grill than what's on the car. And he wasn't really aware of all that and mixed the two. And he's having trouble with his cap, but he did all this work himself. 90-some years old. And put it all back together, and he drove it over. He drove it into the trailer for my brother Terry. Yep. But yeah, we got to get a cap on that. We got a bunch of caps upstairs. This whole deal, this old guy was in 3 beach landings in the Pacific, 18 years old.
Wow.
He said the first landing was, and they made him a driver because he was a truck driver, and he's in the truck club, and he drove truck before he went into the service, and he said that first beach landing was piss your pants, knees banging, scare the living hell out of everybody. He said the second one was awful. The third one, we were looking forward to it. And I was just like, damn. There's an 18-year-old that had quite a summer.
My dad was in World War II as well. He was in, basically Africa and
Wow.
Sicily. He landed in there. He was actually in World War II. I've got the newspaper clipping that he is accredited to be in the third person to land on Anzio. He was a port observer, so he called in artillery.
Jeez,
So
man.
he's accredited to be one of the first 3 people to hit the beach at Anzio.
Wow.
So he got Purple Heart with a cluster. He had a piece of shrapnel in his back from, till they buried him. And he had a permanent heart right here. This is a bullet.
That's
Went
cutting
through
the clothes.
Went through the helmet and grazed his head.
Well, this is Jordan's 32 collection. All those license plates around the outside are pairs from Illinois. The ones in the center are every state in the union that he collected at all the different swap meets all over the country till he completed his collection. It took him many, many years.
That's a lot of license plates.
Yep.
At first, when I was looking at it, I was just seeing those ones, and those were like part of the wall in my mind.
No, it's a trick.
And then I realized, oh, that's all license plates. Like, wow.
And believe it or not, there's a couple of them he put up there upside down just to freak people out. Really look hard to find them. Man, not many people can. But he did the same numbers. I see it now. I know where one of them is. 6196 or 9619. It's just one plate flipped over. With all that 6s and 9s and 1s. You ever see it over there? Eight down from the top in that corner, 8 down corner plate flipped over. And there's another one over here somewhere.
Oh, yeah, I do see that one.
There's one over here too, it's upside down. I forget where it is. Yeah.
Wow.
But he would call back, hey, go next door and see if I got such and such plate, you know. I'd come over here. Oh, man, you don't have Utah. He's like, okay, I do now. He's standing there looking at it there. 1932.